Hello, I'm John Kane, and I welcome you to Let's Talk Native on this Saturday, May 30th, 2020. While this program may not provide a path to spiritual enlightenment, we do encourage and in some cases start conversations. We kind of break the rules here for Native Radio. We don't do prayers, and we don't do buffalo speeches, and we don't do spirituality shows. We take a tough look at our history, oppression, and survival. We talk about culture, the arts, politics, and identity, and we may step on a few toes along the way. But our real goal here is to bring people together by breaking down what separates us. We'll take on the false narratives and provide critical thinking to all that's heaped upon us, and we do it all right here live from the Cattaraugus territory of the Seneca Nation. So let's talk Native. But first, let me remind you that our audio does stream live on our website, letstalknative.com. We stream live video of the show on Facebook, via Facebook Live on our Facebook group pages, and across a bunch of other group pages as well. We take the audio, we put it up on SoundCloud, which puts it out as a podcast on all your favorite podcast platforms. And we take the video, we put it up on our YouTube channel, which is Let's Talk Native TV. I encourage you to subscribe to our podcast and subscribe to our YouTube channel, because not only do we put videos of the shows on our YouTube channel, but we also do short form videos and on a variety and full range of topics. So I encourage you to check those out. Those shorter videos, I'll say it. They can actually be used as teaching mediums. I mean, they really do provide insight on a wide range of topics, and so I encourage you to check those out as well. I'm the show's host and producer, and I'm joined in studio by Jake Proud, who's managing our audio and our video. All right, so if you're watching us and you're used to watching us, you might see that it looks a little different. We are testing out a new system. We've moved away from our Mevo camera, at least for this week, and we're trying open broadcast. So I apologize in advance if we have any hiccups along the way. We are trying to expand our capability. Some things that we're limited by our old system, we're hoping we can expand to do more graphics, more camera angles, more frame shots, that kind of thing. So that's what we're trying to do here. So bear with us, and maybe you'll see nothing different here, other than perhaps the shot looks a little different. But so again, bear with us. All right. As usual, I try to at least hit a few COVID numbers just so people understand. United States is at 1.8 million cases. Just an absolute unbelievable number compared to where any other nation in the world is. 105,000 deaths, well ahead of their predictions that said they would see that in August, and then they said they'd see it in June. Well, we aren't even June yet. So both those numbers are terrible numbers. I will say that both Russia, Brazil, and Russia have finally surpassed New York for the total number of cases. So again, New York had more cases than any country, on the planet, and now two countries have surpassed New York State. And of course, a lot of that New York State numbers comes from the city, but again, that's a statewide number. So Navajo, I just feel compelled to give the number 5,145 cases. 231 dead. That is higher than 12 of the United States. They were kind of, right there, close to where South Dakota is, but now there's several hundred cases above what South Dakota is at. So higher than 12 states and all 4 U.S. territories, including Puerto Rico. That's where Navajo is, and there still seems to be an inadequate process or procedure in place to try to stem the tide. The numbers still seem to be consistently adding 100 plus a day in terms of number of cases. And again, I've got to remind people that the Navajo spread began with a church gathering. So for those that are out there, really crying about, needing to have group worship, just know that from a Native standpoint, Navajo territory, which is the hotspot for Native territories, is the hotspot that began with group worship. In fact, New York City, New York began with group worship too. That's where the first outbreak in New Rochelle, New York, was. So, and that was also due to group worship. Just saying, so people can make their own decisions on how important it is. Even though people can pray, if that's what they want to do, they can pray at home. You can fall on your knees. You can light candles at home. You don't need some temple that looks like a castle, to worship in. But if that's your priority, just know that has been among the super spreading scenarios. Churches, including choirs, by the way. The whole idea of going to choir practice and belting out your favorite religious tune in the faces of everybody else that's a part of your choir. Just got to put it out there. All right. So the show topic, I've just got posted. I can't breathe. I mean, we can't escape. Just like we've talked about COVID-19 for almost 3 months, we can't escape what is happening in the aftermath of George Floyd being killed by the Minneapolis police. And let me say it again. He didn't die in the custody of the Minneapolis police. He was killed by a police officer sustaining a knee on his neck, cuffed and face down on the pavement, with a 200-plus pound officer with his knee on the back of his neck. No need for it. No need for there to be a knee on the back of the neck. While two other officers were also restraining George Floyd, and another just stood back. I guess he was just watching the crowd reaction, so he would know what they were. So 4 cops were involved. One specifically choked the life out of George Floyd with his knee by strangling him from behind, on top of him, on the pavement. Now, if you're wondering, what terrible crime had this person committed? For only we don't know. He was accused of trying to pass what may have been a fake or counterfeit $20 bill. He was killed by police officers. Now, it almost goes without saying, but I'm going to say it. George Floyd is black. The officer who killed him and the other officers were white. That's what kicks this thing off. Now, today, we have riots in cities all across the United States. And now the riots has all those folks on the right condemning them. All those folks on the right didn't have a damn thing to say about another black man being killed by cops. No, I mean, the first thing that the right does, and I'm talking Fox News and Tucker Carlson and Sean Hannity and usually the President of the United States, the first thing the right does is defend the honor of cops, saying, "Oh, we all know most cops are good." See, the way around this thing is say, "Oh, this is just one bad incident." No, it isn't. 1,000 people a year get killed by cops, and most of them are unnecessary. And I've said this before on my New York City show. Let me be clear. There is no reason for a police officer to do anything to the head and neck of a suspect, of a person they're arresting. They don't need to knock teeth out, break orbital sockets. They don't need to gash the head, lay the head wide open. They don't need to strangle, choke, billy club in the face. They don't need to do any of that stuff. Look, the fact that these guys have a gun, usually a taser and pepper spray and handcuffs and a baton or a number of batons, and most of these guys also wear these gloves that have weight in the knuckles. So even in their punches, or even their gloves are weapons. So these guys have any number of weapons. And if they need to place somebody on the ground, and there was no reason to even put George Floyd on the ground. They had him handcuffed hands behind his back, standing up, and then they took him to the ground. Again, no explanation why. And then this one officer knelt, put a knee on the back of his neck. And as the guy is saying, "I can't breathe," the sentiment and I've heard this sentiment from white people all over the place. Well, if you can say you can't breathe, then you can breathe. No, that's not true. If you can eke out words, if you can let air out of your lungs, doesn't mean that you can let air back in. So this is the scenario. And look, I didn't watch the video. I won't watch the video. I've said it before that I'm not. I don't need to see what everybody else is already talking about. I believe what happened. I'm not sitting on a jury, but I know how police officers have this sense of entitlement about their free reign discretion on whether to use lethal force or not. And, look, we've got cops that shoot people. We have got cops that strangle people. We have cops that beat people. In fact, at least 2 of the cops involved in this one have been written up for abuse of force, excessive force, many times, multiple times. The police officer who was standing back with his hands in his pocket just watching, he was written up for knocking the teeth out of a suspect. And again, there's no reason to beat somebody on the face. I mean, there's no reason to beat their body up either. All you have to do is restrain them, if that's even necessary. But to restrain somebody, if somebody's fighting back, you may have to be a little rough to stop their ability to fight back. But it doesn't mean you have the right to kick them in the face. It doesn't mean that you have the right to beat somebody to death. That is not, and the crazy part is, that instant, that split second decision you have to make when you've got your finger on a trigger is one thing. And it's a terrible, you should never have that gun and that finger on the trigger unless something has, unless a conflict has risen to the point where that's necessary. But when a cop says, "I made a split second decision," that's one thing. Beating somebody to death, strangling them, that's not a split second decision. That takes time. It takes a while to choke the life out of somebody. And it takes a malicious intent to beat somebody to death. And that's what we're seeing here. But I gotta do some history here. For one thing, I fully support Black Lives Matter, and the reason I don't need to water it down by saying all lives matter or Native lives matter. The reason Black Lives Matter is a thing is because in the American society, and in fact, in places all over the world, that especially these colonial cultures, Black lives have not mattered. They've only mattered when they were being bought and sold as slaves. Since the time that slavery was outlawed, there's been an effort across the globe, every country that is ruled by white people has placed the value of a black life far beneath their own. So the reason Black Lives Matter, the reason we have Black Lives Matter is because society hasn't demonstrated that. We don't need to say all lives matter, because you know what? We can see whose lives matter. We can see where the affluence is. We can see who is well taken care of. But for the most part, the most obvious people to be subject, and again, the most obvious, I'm not saying that they're the only ones, but the most obvious people to be subject to blatant racism are black men. Why? Because their skin color is so different from white people. Now, if you have a tan, or if you're a brown person, maybe somebody's got to look at you twice. Maybe somebody's going to assess whether what you are. There's this one video I saw where a white guy is asking this woman who looks like she's of Asian descent, "What are you?" And what am I? I mean, but that's the first thing that a white person does is try to determine, what are you? And by what, they mean you're not white, so what are you? You must be something, you're something other than white. Now, a black man is pretty obvious. So that's why they're the obvious recipient of some of this this racism and abuse based on racism. But Native people, we were America's I hate to use this word, but we're America's first niggers here. We were the first ones to be brutalized, even before the first ship of slaves were brought across. It was Native people who were being brutalized. Why? Because we looked way different than the white folks that came up on these lands. And Minnesota, if you think this is like an anomaly, this isn't an anomaly. Minnesota has a history of this stuff. Going back to, I talk about Mankato, Minnesota, where Abraham Lincoln in 1862 signed the execution order for 38 Dakotas. In fact, I'm saying this, I'm looking at the poster for the film Dakota 38. But so in 1862, and this isn't the first time, but in 1862, Abraham Lincoln, the Emancipation President, he signs an execution order for what would be the largest execution. And I mean court orders. I'm not talking about massacres or mass killings, but I'm talking about an execution signed by in this case by the president, but an execution administered through a court of justice. The largest mass execution in the history of the United States was ordered. The order was signed by Abraham Lincoln, and it took place in Mankato, Minnesota. Why? Because the good people of Minnesota demanded it. They wanted the hanging. In fact, they scheduled the hanging the day after Christmas. Why? So they could have it as a part of their festivities, their holiday festivities. So you do your Christmas thing on December 25th, and then December 26th, you put on all your new clothes and you go out and you watch an epic event, 38 Dakota being hung by the neck in a massive gallows in Mankato, Minnesota. And knowing that the President of the United States signed that order. And they wanted to execute over 300. That's what the people of Minnesota wanted. That's what the white folks wanted. Lincoln thought that would look bad. 38 didn't look bad. Not compared to 300. But he had to sign an order for a large execution to satisfy the bloodlust that the white folks had. And again, 1862. How much has changed since 1862 to now? I don't know. We're going to see. We're going to see how this thing transpires ultimately. But the good people of Mankato, Minnesota, they wanted some dead Native people. And look, they didn't want to read about a massacre in the paper. They wanted to see it. They brought their children out to watch this execution. This was a family event. Women in their petticoats and their bonnets and everything out to watch this massive gallows, one set of gallows with 38. Well, actually, they had 39 ropes because one guy they didn't decide to hang. Maybe that's the reason they didn't hang the 39th guy, because they ran out of rope. I don't know, but 38 people with one knocking of the floorboards out from underneath them. 38 killed in an instant. 38 people killed in an instant. Ironically, a week later, Abraham Lincoln would stand up in Washington, D.C. and sign his Emancipation Proclamation. He would give a great speech about it and everything else, and would be praised for all of history. Would be praised as the great emancipator. A week before he did his Emancipation Proclamation, 38 Dakota were hung. And most people don't even know. So when I hear now, and this is the second specific incident, but there's been like 3 of them where cops have killed people. But this is the second Minneapolis police, killing an unarmed black man. So this isn't an anomaly. It happens all the time. But again, I got to remind people that statistically, proportionately, Native people are killed at a higher rate considering our population, a higher rate than anybody else, except for the one age group of 16 to 22. That's the only place where black males are killed at a higher rate than native males. Yeah. Who knew, right? Who knew, right? Native people are killed at a higher rate. Now, not in total numbers, but in a higher rate considering our population. And our population is pretty small. So, you kill half a dozen native people and you can tip the scales pretty quick. And it happens all the time. I mean, honestly, more white people are killed by cops than anybody else. But as a percentage of the population, black people and native people. And it's not even close. Whoever comes in third place isn't even close. Hispanic, Latino, Latinx, whatever. Other brown people, not even close to black people and native people. And the history of native people being killed by police runs deep. In fact, in Minneapolis, that's why AIM came to be. In Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities of Minnesota, that's why AIM came to be. Because native people were being abused, not only by the broad white public, but by the police. So AIM came into existence to be some sort of support system for native people who were living in the cities. AIM wasn't about protecting people on native territories. Not in the beginning. It was about trying to assert some urban protection. And I gotta say, therein lies the problem. Cities. Terrible idea. And look, the whole idea of packing a bunch of people into a small area is a bad idea. And it's a bad idea that we did too. Native people built cities. Now, we didn't maintain them. We tried it. Look, Chichen Itza, Cahokia. There were cities all across the South. I mean, Cahokia was a big enough city. It was bigger than Paris at the same time, and this would be around the 1600s, 1700s. So we did that too, but they didn't work. You end up with strange behaviors when you end up with hierarchies in cities. You end up with the haves and the have-nots. You end up with cult-like fanaticism that develops when you pack people in like that. You have infrastructure problems. You have resource problems. There's all kinds of problems with creating cities. But the other thing is you create so much codependency. And to be clear, if you're not independent, then you aren't free. I mean, native people pretty much lived a free and independent existence before Europeans came. With the exception of when we made the same mistake that other cultures have done by trying to pack people into cities, because we did them too, but we abandoned them. And I would like to think we abandoned them not because of a failure of our evolution, but as a success of our evolution. You come to realize that this is not a good idea. So when I look across the globe, but certainly in the United States, some of the worst things you're going to see are in the urban environments. And part of it is because you create this huge disparity. You have some groups living in abject poverty, and you create this complete disconnect between the haves and the have-nots. If you go out into to rural areas, even the smallest little podunk towns across the United States, even when you have somebody wealthy who lives in or about one of these towns and is a part of not a suburban but a rural community, they still have to get along. They still have to have relationships. I mean, so you go to one of these high school basketball games or football games, and you realize that you've got the people who are affluent and the people who are living in abject poverty. The animosity isn't there. They've learned how to have relationships. But you go into cities and you have ivory towers. You have people who are living on the Upper West Side. And then you have people whose communities are being ripped away from them through gentrification and really casting people into a homeless population. I mean, this is what is so wrong with cities. So when Native people experience this high level or this high rate of death by cops, it isn't always in the cities, because a lot of our people live on Native territories. So it's in these Native territories that our people experience these deaths by cop that most people will never know about. Why? Because we don't have TV action news, that's going to cover the story. So most of our stuff goes unnoticed. It isn't unnoticed by us. And that's why we don't need to counter Black Lives Matter with Native Lives Matter, because if we know that if we can support Black Lives Matter, if we can get cops to stop abusing black men, then it gives us a stronger position to get them to stop abusing us as well. So we don't need to take the movement. Look, just like, black people didn't need to take idle no more. They were welcome to join us in Standing Rock or in any other situation. But we don't need to appropriate and then misappropriate a movement. We can support each other, and we should support each other. And some of the people who are protesting, not just in Minneapolis, but across the United States. Minneapolis, a lot of Native people are out on the streets too. And you know what? I mean, this is one of the sad truths about when things go real bad, and let's be clear here. What starts out as perhaps raucous protests, loud, boisterous, passionate protests, it only takes somebody, an instigator, to get involved. Oftentimes, not even a real protester. Somebody starts smashing windows, and then all hell breaks loose. And in the midst of some of this rioting now, and I don't condemn rioting. I don't. I mean, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to be heard. And, what did Martin Luther King say? A riot is the language of the unheard. It is. Because taking a knee during the national anthem, that was met with as much animosity. And in fact, it's almost a similar animosity than riots. So, and it didn't change, and it's hard to change. I mean, how many people have been killed by cops since Colin Kaepernick essentially got blackballed out of the NFL? I mean, and how many, and look at how many other players were afraid, black players were afraid to take a knee, or had to condemn what Colin Kaepernick did to stay in the good graces of their team owners and that kind of stuff. So don't tell me peaceful demonstrations gets it done. You know who did peaceful demonstrations? Martin Luther King. We know what he got. Yeah, he got famous, and he got dead. So I don't condemn the riots, but when these riots take place, there is loss of personal property. There is damage that happens to buildings, and some of the people who take losses in these riots, probably shouldn't be targeted. I have a friend, my friend Laura Woodstock Waterman, her media, McGeezy Media or Communications, I guess it is, in Minneapolis. The building burned. I mean, they didn't lose everything, but they a building was targeted, and then the fire spread out. And so, I mean, and that's look, that's a bad thing. I mean, Laura's a friend of mine. I used to do her show quite often. She's actually from Seneca Territory originally, but she lives in Minneapolis, and her family does, her daughters. But it's still hard to condemn riots. I mean, it's hard to condemn riots because nothing else seemed to work. Look, I actually walked up and down 7th Avenue in New York City after Freddie Gray. I was a part of, I was on the street then. And you know what? They lined up the street with cops. They had cops lined up, trying to, keep people from getting too carried away, I guess. So it was more of a police demonstration than it was a demonstration in support of Freddie Gray. But this is, sometimes you got to burn it down, folks. And I know I'm speaking into a microphone. Those of us who speak into microphones aren't supposed to say this. But I got to tell you, if you're outraged by the riots, but if you weren't moved by Eric Garner being choked to death, I can't breathe. If you weren't moved by George Floyd being choked to death with a knee to the back of his neck, having his throat pressed against the ground, whose only words was, "You're killing me, I can't breathe." If that didn't move you, I don't give a rat's ass about your opinion about riots. You can get all kinds of pissed off about riots. What did Tucker Carlson say? He said that all these riots are such a terrible thing because they place every American in danger. Oh, really? You mean white people? See, I've never heard Tucker Carlson condemn the police for black people or people of color, Native people living in danger. I mean, we have to raise our children a certain way. We have to have the talk, right? This is how you respond when a police officer. Don't assume just being right is enough. Being right isn't enough. Because they don't care if you're right. What they care about is that you're not white. And it matters. And it matters. Look, I'm not saying that white people don't get killed by cops. They do. But the assumption is, if you're white and a cop pulls you over, then a process plays out. But we never know how somebody's going to interpret whether it's us getting a bit of an attitude. And yes, when a cop pulls me over, I get attitude. It'd be one thing if I was speeding, if I did something that I know is wrong, and I'm at their mercy. They're going to write me a ticket. But if I'm gonna get belligerent with them, I have to be prepared, and I have. The ones I used to get belligerent with were the border patrol folks. I was always getting pulled over every time I leave Akwesasne to come back home. I'd always get pulled. Or actually, take it back. I just got pulled over a few times on the way there. One time I got pulled over leaving Akwesasne, and they told me they had monitored me going to Akwesasne, and now they were pulling me over because I was leaving. So that's how much they were following me. And yeah, I gave them a hard time, understanding that there was risk involved. But I also knew there was how far I could go. But this is the conversation that we have to teach our kids how to survive police altercations, or not even altercations, how to survive police interaction. And black parents have to have a more extensive conversation with their young sons than with anybody. I mean, I got to tell you, as a Native person, it's hard for us to prepare our kids. Honestly, it is, because our kids experience racism, but not the same way black people do. And so sometimes our kids don't realize what it is until it slams them in the face. And I don't mean physically, although sometimes physically. That's part of the problem. Hey, I'm not. We're gonna take a break here and come back. I want to get back into some of this stuff. Let me go out. We'll go out with a little bit of music, and we'll come back, and we'll wrap up the hour from there. This is John Kane, and this is Let's Talk Native. All right, thanks for coming back. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. Let me give a shout out to my sponsors. I want to thank Ross and Holly John and the RJE family of businesses. I want to thank the folks at Grand River Enterprises and Native Wholesale Supply, and Eric White and ERW Enterprises. And I got a few other individuals, and I've talked about VJ, I talk about Tony and Cindy and some of these others who on occasion will put a check in the mail, and I greatly appreciate it. What we're doing here today is we're demonstrating, we've done some equipment purchases. We're trying to expand our capability even as we do live streaming. So we're operating on the OBS platform here. We're still streaming on Facebook, but we're trying to expand what we can do on camera, on screen. So those of you who support the show and send an occasional check-in every time, it allows us to buy equipment and to expand what we're doing here. And we are limited. Look, we're on native territory. One of the things that we are most limited by is internet. We don't have high-speed internet that runs. There's no fiber optic cables that run through territory. We don't have cable anyway. We're relying on satellite dishes and MiFi jetpacks and that kind of stuff. So, but we're getting it done, and we've gotten it done. So we're always at a bit of a we're always challenged a little bit. And if you do see a situation where our broadcast is interrupted, usually that's because of the bandwidth or whatever else. So we're trying to work through all that stuff, and we appreciate those of you who support the show that allow us to expand our capabilities at the same time. I also want to thank all of you who listen to the show, who share the show, who provide some feedback with your comments. Those of you who share my podcasts and the YouTube videos, I appreciate it all. That's how the conversation that I'm trying to have here continues, and it continues in your home. It continues in your workplace or among your family and that kind of thing. The one thing, the greatest compliment I can get is when somebody's listened to a show, heard some of what I had to say, opinion, facts or opinion, and then kind of looked it up themselves and verified some of the things that I'm saying, and then they feel empowered to engage in a conversation that they might otherwise shy away from due to a lack of information. But when somebody tells me that I've armed them with information, not to hurt somebody, not to fight somebody, but to engage with somebody, that is the greatest compliment I can receive from a listener. So again, I thank those of you who've offered that comment back, and it's why we do what we do here. Couple of things. I mentioned Colin Kaepernick at the beginning. I posted one of the memes I posted that somebody had produced has a picture of Colin Kaepernick on the knee, on his knee at a football game during the national anthem, and side by side with this cop with his knee on the neck of George Floyd, and it said, and asked a simple question: which knee bothers you? Because we know, for those of us who supported what Colin Kaepernick represented, we know how pissed off white people were. The president of the United States could barely contain himself. They ran Colin Kaepernick out of the NFL, tried to pass new rules at the NFL, main office to try to stop anybody from doing anything like this. Because taking a knee during the national anthem, apparently, it should be deemed criminal. As far as somebody like Donald Trump is concerned. The reaction from that peaceful protest. Now, granted, that reaction also gave him more publicity, so it ended up furthering the reach of his message. But again, it turned into the anti-patriotic, hates America. No, he hates cops killing people without unarmed people. That's what he hated. And you know what? That was when Colin Kaepernick. He wasn't talking about black men. Colin Kaepernick reached across all people of color who had been who were being affected by this kind of abuse, this kind of tyranny. When all these white guys arm themselves and they show up at state capitals because they're told they got to wear a mask and they think that's tyranny, and they're arming themselves with their Second Amendment rights because they're to fight tyranny. Apparently, they don't understand what tyranny is. Tyranny is when a cop gets away with murder and can kill people, and then just whip up some, I viewed them, I had a perceived threat. That's tyranny. And I don't see a whole lot of white boys arming themselves with their automatic weapons to stand up to police. No, they're going to go there and demonstrate at the Capitol to a bunch of suits. Yeah, that's real brave. That's real brave. But Colin Kaepernick, this is exactly why he knelt. And and he started out just sitting. And after talking with some folks, he says, I don't want to just sit. I don't want people to think I don't care. I want people to know that I'm doing something. I'm taking an action, and the action was I won't stand. I'll take a knee. And taking a knee is a very solemn thing to do. I mean, people propose to their wives by doing it. People take the, when our kids play football, if somebody gets hurt, or any sport, lacrosse, somebody gets hurt on the playing field, both teams take a knee out of respect, and to pay respect to an injured player. Colin Kaepernick was paying respect to many injured people. And he did it during the national anthem because there was no home of the brave, land of the free, home of the brave. Did I say that? Home of the brave, land of the free, something like that. Whatever they say. I mean, that's why he was taking a knee, because of injured people. He was doing literally what he was doing since he played Pop Warner football as a little kid. We got man down, so we take a knee. Until those injuries stopped, he was taking a knee. And they haven't stopped. A global pandemic, a country leading the world in the number of cases, 1.8 million cases, 105,000 people dead. It doesn't stop cops. Nope, we're not going to use this moment where we could come together and stand with each other as we try to survive this global pandemic. Instead, the country, the envy of the world, right? Great America, making America great again. 105,000 people at a time. Yeah. Not even during a global pandemic can racism take a break. It doesn't. It just keeps going. And look, we see it. Nothing's changed for Native people who are stopping pipelines. Nothing's changed for Native people who are trying to stand up for their own distinct rights on their territories. Nothing has changed for a young person of color who has to be concerned that they'll be killed by a cop. And not even young people. I mean, I think Floyd was in his 40s. He's a grown man. He's not even in the high demographic for black people being killed by cops. He's actually past the prime of prime targets for cops. I don't know. I find this very frustrating, and the noise that I hear about rioting, and to be clear, cities across the United States, Buffalo, the one in our backyard, Buffalo, New York, riots today. I heard a car drove into a crowd, and this was done intentionally to hype up the crowd. They dragged him out. I think they roughed him up a little bit, probably trashed his car a little bit. But you know what? They didn't go into a spree of destroying all other property. Although I did hear a Spectrum News van might have gotten tangled up in this thing. But you know what? Media too. If the media can't flat out say that George Floyd was killed by a police officer, and that killing was assisted by 3 other police officers, then just say the damn thing. We don't need murder has a legal definition and connotation to it, but killing, he didn't die at that in police custody. He was killed by a police officer, and that killing was assisted by 3 others. At some point, we, the public, and by all means, videotape these things. Because I tell you, if there wasn't videotape, nothing would happen here. Nothing. There would be no reaction if this wasn't caught on video. But while somebody's video recording this, somebody else should be taking that freaking cop out. I mean, tackle the guy. Look, yeah, you're probably going to get thumped up a little bit. But if you got a crowd of 50 people there, or 10 people there, and there's only 4 cops, then take a chance. Take a chance at saving a man's life. Look, your thoughts and prayers don't mean shit. At some point, we've got to take action. And if you're prepared to go out and riot afterwards, then why aren't you prepared to tackle a cop who's killing somebody? It's not like the cop had his gun drawn. I mean, look, I'm not saying jump in front of a cop and take a bullet. I'm not saying try to save a man's life that way. But if you see a cop beating somebody, make him stop. And you know what? This is how we're going to change things. Because their system isn't going to do it. Look, yeah, they charged him with, third-degree murder and manslaughter. Not first-degree murder. I mean, this guy, he'll probably walk, maybe he doesn't. Maybe this guy is one of the few cops who actually gets sent to prison. But he's going to be like these white guys who go to prison and they get out in a few years. I mean, this guy's already killed somebody before. Killed a native person, 12 years ago or so. Killed a native person. There are cops who could spend their entire careers and never have to fire their sidearm. There are cops who never kill anybody in their entire careers. I'm not saying they don't beat a few people more than they should, but how is he going to have some of these cops in a place like Minneapolis, where a cop has 2 deaths on his resume? And again, the police officer who was standing back watching all of this, apparently he was written up for busting teeth. And again, there's no reason to beat somebody on the head and neck. There's no reason to deliver the kind of physical punishment that could kill somebody. Because I'll tell you what, if you hit somebody in the body, it still hurts. And you can still subdue somebody. You don't need to lay their skulls open. You don't need to break their eye sockets, make people go blind. You don't need to remove their teeth. You don't need to choke them out. In UFC fighting, when you put, and these guys are trained for this. And when somebody puts them in the chokehold, they tap the arm and they stop. What is a person supposed to do when the cop won't stop? And we just sit around and watch? And what, we're going to riot days later? By all means, riot. Raise hell. Burn it down. But you know what? If you happen to be, and especially if you're with a crowd of people, don't let a handful of cops take the life of somebody. If you have the manpower and the physical presence to stop it. Those 3 cops who watched this cop, keep a sustained knee on the back of this guy, they're guilty for a couple of reasons. They're guilty, one thing, for assisting, aiding and abetting. They're actually part of this thing. But that's only half the crime. The other part of the crime for those 3 cops, well, all 4 of them, is that they have an obligation to not let somebody be killed in their presence. I mean, the whole thing is they could have shot that police officer any one of those 3 cops could have shot that police officer. Why? Because he was perpetrating a crime. He was creating a threat, a deadly threat against somebody. I mean, I know it sounds unreasonable to think that a cop would actually take another cop out, and of course they didn't need to shoot him. They could have pushed the son of a gun off. But you know what? So could we. So riots are going out, throughout. Look, and they should happen in every city. And you know what? They should happen in Buffalo too, because Buffalo's not clean here. I don't care if they got a black mayor, and that black mayor was just on television yesterday saying, "Well, we're very proud because Buffalo has the most black officers. The Buffalo PD has the highest level of black officers than they've ever had in the history of the city of Buffalo." Well, let me tell you a secret. Black cops can be abusive too. And you know what? You know who black cops are most likely to be abusive towards? Black people. Doesn't make any sense, does it? They say, well, a black cop can't be you can't use race as a reason for a black cop to kill a black suspect. Yes, you can. You know why? I talk about it all the time, the doll test. A person who's joined the military or the police or any of these, who joined any of this, they've already been conditioned. And they too have it ingrained in them that a black man is more of a threat than a white man. It doesn't matter that they're black. The doll test is that simple test, and it's been done over and over again, and repeatedly, and it's always the same results. It's where they take children, little children, and they have a white doll and they have a black doll, and they ask the children, "What's the good doll? What's the black doll?" The white kids all say, obviously, white kids say, "Oh, the white doll's the cute one. That's the pretty one. That's the good one. That's the good baby." Well, who's the bad baby? Oh, the black one. Well, who's the ugly baby? Oh, the black one. But you know what? The black kids said the same thing. Why? Because even before they go to school, even before they're out of the home, and having that influence of the non-family environment around them, they've already been conditioned by what they see on television, by the shows, by the ads, by they already have it. It's been ingrained in their heads what is pretty, what is beautiful, what is beauty, and what is ugly. And that's what they've been taught. You would think that when a black child is offered a white doll or a black doll, that they would say, I'll take the one that looks like me. In fact, when they're asked, what's the good doll? They say the white doll. They say, what's the ugly doll? They say the black doll. And they said, which one looks more like you? They know they look more like the black doll. So that means they already think that they're the bad one. They already think that they're the ugly one. So when that black child grows up and becomes a cop, you don't think it's already been, it's at the subconscious level, but it's also very much at the conscious level. A black police officer, they participate in stop and frisk, just like the white cops did. So yeah, there are black cops that are out there who are every bit as abusive and swelled up heads with their own privilege and their own ability to have very loose discretion on their use of deadly force. The solution to the problem isn't to have more black cops. You got to change the system. This is what we mean by systemic racism. Because when the system is racist, it doesn't even matter if you put people of color in that system. Now, they don't believe, and when I say a black man can't be racist, or a native person can't be racist, what I mean is that we don't believe that we're superior, that we're genetically superior. But you know what? There are plenty of native people, and there are plenty of black people who actually believe white people are superior, and that people of color are inferior. That's still racism, but it's not racism in the same way that a white person thinks that they are the superior race. This is different because we have this our own self-deprecation that we buy into the system. Why? Because it's the only system where you can win, right? If this is the game that we all have to play, and we don't all have to play it, but if this is the game we all have to play, you got to know what the rules are. And you got to rise above and put your own distance between you, even as a black man, and the black people you need to look down on, especially if you're in a position like a police officer. I mean, they got to make sure that you, as a black man in a uniform, are you prepared to shoot and beat a black man? I mean, there's no test where they ask you that flat out, but it's just like the military. They've got to condition you to make sure that you're not going to hitch when it comes time to kill somebody. It's just what's necessary. So that's how the system works. So there has to be a revamp. I don't know how you fix a police department. I don't know how you fix it. Because the whole system, you have to understand, policing, the whole idea of forming police departments, cops, constables on patrol, was to protect property. And you know what property? White people. The whole foundation, the reason you even have a police force is to protect property. So that's why people get outraged when they see rioting or looting or destruction of public or property. Because they're more outraged that stuff is being broken and wasted or stolen. They're more worried about stuff than they are about life. Another black man dead. You know, it's funny because you see this, especially on the right. All of these people who are outraged about having to wear masks on this COVID-19 stuff, right? They feel like they have had their freedoms taken away from them. They don't care about the 105,000 people who've died or how that happened. They're going to be convinced that, no, there's nothing I can do to stop that, so I don't want my freedom infringed upon. Grandma dies, she lived a full life. That's the disconnect, right? That's the difference between cultures. You know, the biggest loss of life, single loss of life, is out of these nursing homes. In New Jersey, 50% of the people who died in nursing homes. Why? Because that's what white people do. They send all their people to nursing homes. Throughout the rest of the country, something like 30%. 30% of that 100,000 people were elderly whose kids put them in nursing homes. And that should have been the easiest group of people to protect. But they didn't. And this is the society that doesn't care about that. This is a society that doesn't care about a person of color, a black man, being killed by a police officer over an alleged $20 crime. $20 crime. Eric Garner. And I got to remind people of Eric Garner. He wasn't selling cigarettes the day, and that was the whole thing. The criminal that Eric Garner was, the crime that he was alleged to have been involved in, was selling a loose cigarette. Loosies, they call them. And it's done all over New York. Why? Because New York City has another $10 tax on top of the $10 state tax. It's an insane, it's sin tax in its purest form, right? So Eric, living in Staten Island, he used to get cigarettes and sell them out, single cigarettes, loose cigarettes. And the cops busted him for that. But on the day they killed him, he wasn't selling cigarettes. They just targeted him. They already knew. The big guy, just like George Floyd. A big guy that white men felt like, we can take this guy down. We don't care if he's big and black. We're going to show the power that we have. Not the physical power, but the political power they have. That they can commit these crimes against people with no repercussions. The guy who killed Eric Garner never got charged. He stayed on the police force. Actually got more money because he actually was taken and was given desk duty and additional overtime. Actually made more money in New York City for 5 years. Then finally the mayor insisted that he be terminated. The 4 cops involved in the death of George Floyd were fired almost immediately, and the guy who actually committed the murder, the killing, has been charged. The other 3 have not been charged yet. So riots continue, and again, if things escalate in Buffalo, so be it. I don't have a love for the city of Buffalo. You can't love these things. We should love each other. We should care enough about somebody being killed by a cop that we step up and we want some change. But I don't care about City Hall. I don't care about City Hall in any city. Martin Luther King says, a riot is the language of the unheard. That's what we're up against, folks. Look, I want to thank you guys for listening. This is John Kane. This is Let's Talk Native. We'll see you in a few days. Yahweh.